What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. So with me here today, I have Nathan. I was actually over at his place not that long ago and did a video on this aquarium, but we're back here today because this is a 1-year anniversary of basically when this tank got started. And that 1-year mark is a pretty significant milestone because it's usually when a tank really starts to take off. So it's nice to kind of get this visit in and see how things are looking. So first off, thanks so much, Nathan, for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you. It is always a good time. I just love doing it.
So we're kind of like snickering here because this is our second time recording this podcast. The first time that we went through this entire thing, at the very end, the audio thing bombed out and we weren't able to save anything.
It was 45 minutes packed full of smooth, elegant, impactful, concentrated information.
It was perfect audio. We never had any hiccups or didn't say not even once.
I was sitting here thinking this is amongst the best recordings Tidal Gardens has ever done. It is so smooth. It
Joe
is so
Rogan
natural.
has never had a podcast this good.
It is so smooth, and then it crashed out when you tried to stop it.
So now you guys get this version. All right, so where shall we start? Now that we've hit this now that you have hit this 1-year milestone, what are your thoughts on it? Are you happy with it? How are things looking?
Yeah, I am. I'm really happy with it. Overall, people will ask, what would I do differently? And nothing really comes to mind. I'm happy with the dimensions of the tank. I'm happy with how it is set up in terms of plumbing and efficiency. The whole system, including the frag tank and how that's plumbed in. The spacing that I have around the tank, behind the tank, I don't know if it's a little over 2 feet back there. I have like one of those mini scaffolding benches or whatever you would call them that I can step up on and walk across. I think it's 4 feet or 3 feet wide or long, so I can work on a good portion of the tank at the time. It makes chores on the tank actually easier, even though it's a much bigger tank than the 200 6-foot tank. This one's 450 at 9 feet. Just the space, which was something I learned from the old system. I wanted more space all around the tank to work on it to make chores easier, which it does, which makes them more likely to be done and also done in an easier fashion. Scraping the back of that big tank that I like to keep it black. The coralline algae will grow on there back there, but every month or two I go back there and I'll scrape it, and that's something I stopped doing on my old tank because it was such a pain. But I much like that black background. It kind of helps the corals and everything else kind of pop.
You get that contrast.
The contrast, and yeah, you know, if you have that coralline purple, varying purplish background, some of your corals and your rocks, you lose depth and contrast. And focus on those, in my opinion.
That kind of leads me into like one thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand when it comes to having a really large aquarium. This channel is largely aspirational in the content that we provide because a lot of the tanks that we focus on tend to be very large. 300, 500, even 1,000 gallons at times. And this is a pretty elaborate coral farm here that we talk about pretty frequently. And I think that lost in that aspirational subject matter, because we don't really talk a lot about like small aquariums or nanos or anything like that. What's lost is that these things can be a major pain in the butt. A lot of times people aspire to this only because they don't really know what is all involved in it. I can pretty much say that having a huge tank really is not for everyone. Can you kind of talk about how you progressed from something that was a little over 200 gallons to something like that's this large? Because going from something that's maybe a 50-gallon tank to a 100-gallon tank, it's not a ton different. You might be doing a little bit of a bigger water change. You might be scraping a little bit more glass, perhaps a few more inches of glass, but it's not that different. Whereas once you start to get to like the 500-gallon range, it's a different world. Can you kind of walk me through like how you went about putting something together where you didn't make it a second job to try to maintain?
Yeah, so I started with the 93 cube, and that was pretty simple to set up overall. And then I graduated onto a 200-gallon system, 6-foot tank. And I kind of planned it out. I'm piecing it together as I go when I was setting it up. I knew what pipes and drains I was going to have, but I didn't really care or take too much time to consider how to direct those pipes. It was like, I just need to get this from point A to point B. Who cares what the path is like? Over time, the tank kind of turned into a Frankenstein in a sense, and it became a chore to try and change things out, to do some maintenance on the tank, and it was closer to the wall. I learned from having that tank for I think it was about 8 years, that next time around, I'm going to plan it out even more, learning from my experience with that 200-gallon tank. When I get the idea of a new tank in my mind, it's like Inception. Somebody put it in there and it just won't stop. It continues to develop and develop in my mind. Then I start to scratch some things down, keep some spreadsheets and little drawings in my note paper. Then it was like, all right, this is going to be the path of the plumbing. It's going to be clean. It's going to be tucked in or as high as possible, and having a good pathway for the plumbing then allows better access to everything else within the tank, above and below, and getting around the tank. And then the equipment and how that's going to work and where the main hub's going to be. So planning a lot of it out in advance and trying to keep it as clean and straight in terms of simplicity and routing of everything. Try and route everything together so you don't have to get around 6 different obstacles. It's all running through the same highway, basically.
And this is all in service of making it easier to maintain.
Correct. To get around the tank, maintain it, do what you need to do. Even though I have a bigger tank now, a much bigger tank and frac tank, a bigger system overall, the maintenance of it is much easier. Another planning aspect of it was the hood over the lights, or the canopy that the lights hang from. Just having all their power supplies and electronics up in that canopy makes a huge difference because it's not in my way down on the ground or behind the tank. If you recall, behind my 200 was just a mess of wires, and it was just insane. And like
a snake pit.
Yes, it was. It just got out of control over 8 years. This time, everything runs together in the same fashion, the same route. There's not that tangle anymore, and that was a big consideration as I did things.
Yeah, because I don't think people realize just there's like 7 or 8 lights. You know, most people have like 1 or 2 lights.
It's a lot of cords.
Yeah. 7 or 8 lights means
power
7
supplies.
or 8 power supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
all that management.
Yeah. Plan ahead.
Another problem that manifests in big tanks is stuff that normally in, I guess, a more typical sized aquarium would not be that big of an issue, is something as simple as catching a fish. And I don't think that people fully appreciate just how insanely crazy that is. So I remember we had to catch this powder blue out of your tank. I basically think we just got lucky.
Probably, but I had the powder blue and the powder brown in kind of I had them in quarantine, and I added them to my display tank, and things were good for a week or two, but they were constantly chasing each other, but nothing else bothered them. The Achilles didn't care about them. But then they started to develop maybe ick and some sort of weird tabby parasite, it seemed, on both of them, and then it started showing up on the Achilles tank, and that's when I started to get kind of panicky, and I was running through options. One of the options was setting up my stock tanks in my family room and doing like a tank transfer method of all my fish. And everyone told me how crazy, like I knew it would be a huge undertaking. People were telling me how crazy I was and that they did not know if that was realistic. So then I came up with the idea, well, let's get the powder blue and the powder brown out of the display tank. And I'm trying to think of ways to do it without tearing down the whole thing. So Than came over with a couple other people, and I was optimistic that we could get both fish. I was like, we're going to take screen top netting, we're going to divide up the tank, we'll flush it into a corner, and that'll be it. We'll get them. It shouldn't be that big of a problem. Like, I was at work going through all these emotions, trying to figure out. And I was like, that'll do it. I know I'm going to weight down the bottom of this. It'll be like those fishing nets that they use with the little weights in them in the ocean. It's not going to be a problem. And it did not go that smooth.
Yeah, the net thing definitely didn't do anything. It just added something into the tank that we couldn't get our nets around.
It was a really cool idea, though. I'm telling you, it was awesome.
And I guess this is the problem of doing these aquascapes where it's one continuous giant megalith.
Yeah.
That's all cool. It's, well, you can't take it apart in segments.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing.
Yep.
But I just remember, like, it was just all of us with, like, little nets trying to, like, well...
Dan gave up 2 minutes in. He was like, this is not happening.
It's
no
not happening.
way.
There's no universe.
I'm like, no. I think we get him in this corner. No, I think we can do this. And fortunately, luckily, I think we exhausted them a little bit. We got the powder blue in a corner and he got netted. We tried to get the powder brown for another 5 minutes and realized that he was far smarter at keeping close and under the rocks, and there was no way we were ever going to get him.
I was stunned that we caught the one fish.
Yeah.
And then here I am thinking, like, okay, look, I just watched the Loki show. And I'm like, there is no universe that exists where we're going to catch these fish. Like,
no alternative timeline.
There's no
variance. No.
Nothing.
The outcome was we got the powder blue out. He got here, got medicated up, is thriving, is a meanie. And the powder brown and the Achilles are doing well in my tank. Occasional little spots, but nothing like they were. So I consider that a win. They've done great. At times they're totally spot free, and other times little spots pop up. But it was
a lot worse. It looked like they had been kind of rolled in flour practically.
Yeah. So I learned my lesson in trying to add more tangs or whatnot, at least for a little while.
For a little while.
You know, I've had that Achilles since it was a juvenile, and it's probably going on 8 or 9 years. So I did start to get panicky when I realized I may have really caused an issue, and if I would have lost him. I was already so nervous about doing the transfer from the old tanks to the new tank with him, but he's a trooper. He's good.
So this kind of segues just a little bit into my curiosity about like quarantining. We've only recently started quarantining both fish and corals. For the longest time, it was just something that was not something that we could physically do here. But with the new building, lots more opportunities for such things. I already know that you do not have any kind of quarantine thing for your fish and coral. And I was kind of wanting to get a gauge on how worried you are that the next fish that you add might be that velvet bomb that causes you to lose like all your fish. Like that sort of thing. Like, because not to belittle anybody else's tank that only has like 2 clownfish in it, okay? But you've got a lot of fish. You've got a lot of really expensive fish.
I have a lot of fish that I've had for 10 plus years too, or 8 to 10 years, you know, going back.
Going all the way back to the 200-gallon tank.
To the 93 cube.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A couple of them go back that far. So
yeah.
The Royal Grandma is the oldest fish in my tank now, and it's been in all 3. So
wow.
But yeah, so I do not have a quarantine system. I don't really have any desire or plans to add fish that tend to be the velvet bomb type. And that doesn't mean a fish I add won't be. Also, because I don't quarantine and because I have the livestock that I do, one of the reasons I don't quarantine much anymore, or even try to, is because my system clearly has a little bit, some ick in it and other things. So I'm not stopping anything from getting in the tank. That stuff, it's in there. Keep the fish happy, well-fed, nutrition, all that stuff seems to do the trick. But I still have a bit of concern. So I'm almost exclusively only getting fish now from Diver's Den, because that's where I got the Achilles tang 8 or 9 years ago. And I've gotten several other very finicky fish from there, various types of leopard wrasses and orange spot filefish. And they've always come in good condition, always come in eating relatively soon. I don't think they will claim to quarantine fish, and I think their procedure tells you to quarantine fish. So, you know, I'm not advising you to disregard their advice, but that is my kind of line of thinking. Going forward, I really only have plans to add additional wrasses, and mostly leopard wrasses and those tend not to do all that well in quarantine. People do it and can do it. I understand that, but I've always had luck with leopard wrasse type fish, putting them right in, and they make the adjustment pretty quick. So it is a dangerous line. I will acknowledge that. I do have quite a bit at risk, but
Yeah, it's not so much trying to be like judgy about it, because I think the vast majority of people don't quarantine, right? Most people have enough like budget and space for one tank, not several tanks for their one tank.
And whenever I hear of a retailer or fish supplier or whatever who does quarantine and has a quarantine protocol, I'm very interested and I'm willing to pay for that. Like, for instance, the copper band. You can get it cheaper, I believe, from live aquaria, just regular live aquaria, or online retailer who doesn't do quarantining or conditioning. But I think it's more than worth paying twice as much for the conditioned eating, proven eating, healthy, good body mass copper band butterfly, because they're specialized and oftentimes don't do very well.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to places that provide that service, it is worth any bit of upcharge, even if it's triple the price. Because one thing that I can most certainly guarantee you is you cannot save money on dead fish. It's just not ever going to work out for you. And also, just that, again, the additional risk that you take by introducing something that could be potentially sick into your tank, full of healthy fish.
Yeah.
It's such a concern. So obviously, I think that the best case scenario is that there is a quarantine, but even if not, then hopefully it was quarantined at some point in the chain. That does help a lot.
Yep, I would recommend it if you have the space and patience, and
or even if you know of somebody local to you that could quarantine it for you. Hopefully your friend has a quarantine tank that's not currently quarantining anything.
Yeah.
Who knows anything, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the equipment on this tank. So let's start with the lighting. We may have talked about this the last time I looked at this tank. But since then, Orphek, the manufacturer that makes these lights, they came up with an even newer product that is, I think it's called the Orphek Icon, whereas these are the Atlantics. And they're supposedly easier to control and have 6 channels of controllability rather than 4. So first off, did you have any appetite for upgrading?
I do not at this point. I really like the Atlantic 4s. They're not that old. The color on the corals is great. The spectrum of light that it puts out, to my eye, is very appealing.
It's very flattering on camera, too.
Yeah, and it looks great. I like everything they do. I don't think I could ask for more. And if there is, I'm not aware of what they could do better.
The app is not my favorite.
The app, correct, but that's not going to make me upgrade or change my lights.
True.
So I had AI Soul Blues on my 200-gallon tank up until last year, so clearly I'm not one to change my lights just to change them. If they're doing well, I have no problems or no desire to change them. They've been good lights. I had one of them go a little wonky on me, and the blues down the center 2 rows all went out. So I contacted Orphek, and they got back to me quickly, and we went through some diagnostics where they had me take it apart and switch some wires just to confirm it was the problem they suspected, which it was. So that does take time, like my time and effort. And then they shipped me out a whole new board of LEDs. So I had to disassemble the lights, and every LED has its own lens. So I had to pop. They're not hard, but you got to pop all those off, and then you got to undo the heat sink and the outside vent, and it takes some time. Put it all back together, and it worked. Get it back up the light rig. But it took hour. And now that I think about it, it probably took an hour and a half to 2 hours to go through that whole process. That while I do have some familiarity with electronics, like building a computer, it still wasn't seamless and quick. I only had to do that for 1 out of 7 units, which I understand. I'm okay with that. They didn't give me any hassle, and they were very accommodative, sending the directions and how to get it all done. It works and it looks great. None of the other lights have that problem. If it started to develop over time on the other lights, that would be disappointing. I would be less pleased, but 1 out of 7 having a hiccup, I'm okay with.
I've had a couple of like kind of like quibbly things as well with Orphek, and they've always been like very accommodating as well for my situation. And sometimes they're more than willing to go through the whole process with you. And I think sometimes just because of how like busy or distracted we are, we tend to like get to a point where like, good enough. Because for example, one of our lights has like a flicker that flickers 3 times a day, and after a while, it's like, you know what? I could still try to fix this, but I just stopped. I just don't care. Yeah, this is fine. This is fine. But they're more than willing to work with you. I think ideally, in a perfect world, I do like it when a company will just send you a new one and you send back the old one, and like that's it. Like that's my ultimate. I realize not every company can do that. That's not.
That would be ideal and more convenient. I'm okay with doing it once. Like with the self-repair.
That second one's gonna cost you.
Yeah, if we have to continue, if those problems crop up again and I have to do it with another couple units, which I don't know if that will, but at that point it's like, okay.
In fairness, you've had one unit forever. This isn't just like a new purchase for you, like in the sense that I've never used Orphek before. Like you've had an Orphek fixture for years that worked fine.
Yes, yeah. It is. I now replaced it because it was visually quite a bit different spectrum.
But it worked.
It worked, yes. Yeah. But it has now been replaced. So I am optimistic and believe that I won't have any further issues.
Yes. Faith-based strategies.
Yes. And 4 years at least, and then I'll be all right. So 3 more years.
Let's back up just a little bit. Going from your old lighting setup, which were some AI Soul Blues, when you were in the market for purchasing new lights, what was kind of your thought process, and what was your criteria and the sort of things that you really prioritized in looking for lights?
So I wanted proven lights, and I wanted somewhat reputable and quality lights. People throw out all sorts of ideas, but I had used the Orphek Atlantic version 3 on my frag tank. So I had experience with that and trust in that, and I liked the quality of it. And I also considered Ecotech Radions because while you use them here, and I've seen them, a lot of large scale operations and hobbyists use them, and to great success. That was basically the 2 I had in mind. Looking at it further.
But not AI.
Not AI. And I like the AI Soul Blues, but I don't know. I don't have specific way to cite it, but it felt like to me they kept tinkering with things so much and so many different variations of their lights that I don't even know what the newest one is.
Mm-hmm.
And what was after the Soul? The Vega, mm-hmm. and the Hydra, then the Hydra something else, and the Hydra HD, and this and that. And I'm like, I don't even know what is what with them anymore.
It's like almost like too frequent of updates.
Yes, and I don't want frequent updates. I want a very good light, and why do you have to frequently update a very good light?
That's true.
When Ecotech went from was it version 4 to 5, that it was drastically different, right? Yeah, and that was around the time I was looking for lights. And so I was like, I know the 4s work, or 4 Pros or whatever, and that's kind of like what I would go with, but I'm right now looking for a proven light, and I'm guessing the 5s will be good, but some people were happy with them, and some, how can you form an opinion that quick? But they were different.
The control is completely different too.
Yeah,
everything.
So I was in that evaluation period at that time, and the 4s were starting to be hard to find. I was like, I don't even know then. But also from a coverage map on my tank, even though the Orpheks are more expensive per unit, they cover more area, and I didn't need as much in terms of coverage per cost. The Orpheks were a better fit for my tank as well.
Because like the Radions are kind of like puck cluster based lighting, whereas the Orphek is more of like a panel.
Yes, and that's what led me to getting the Atlantic to begin with back 5-6 years ago on my frag tank, was that I started to like that panel look in terms of spreading the light, even though, because I had the AI Souls, which were more pucks, but several little pucks. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I got the Orpheks originally, and then, I continued to like that. When I put the Orphek Atlantic 4s up over the tank and got them on, I was like, this light is, the spectrum and the look of them are just great. I mean, I was really impressed and happy with it. I've been happy with those ever since.
Nice, nice. Moving on, you are going on vacation in a couple days.
I know we did a pretty good segment of this earlier, but it crashed, so we'll do it again.
Okay, so you're going on vacation for 2 weeks. So you're leaving all this behind to go see what something might look like in Hawaii. That's similar.
Yes, I'm going to go swimming in the reef instead of scrubbing and cleaning and maintaining a reef.
When it comes to vacation planning, while also owning something like this, how do you go about planning around possible imminent disaster?
A couple things to tackle. First was making sure that the equipment is up and running, hopefully at optimal performance. And that included replacing some hoses on the pumps on the automatic water change. Cleaning the MP60 was making some noise, and I was going to clean it anyway, so I cleaned that up. Checking on everything, making sure that all the dosing containers are full and will last while I'm gone. Just making sure the equipment's in a good state. Then I put together a team of friends, reefing friends, who are going to be checking in once every day or every other day. I think I have 4 different people coming in throughout the 2 weeks, so they don't have to come over. Somebody doesn't have to come over every day. They know my tanks. One of them helped me plumb it all. They're pretty good on knowing what's going on. I had them over the weekend, and they took a look at everything. I showed them how I run things. The key things to look at to see if something's off, mostly it's the top off or the automatic water change pumps not quite synced up right. But even then, that doesn't happen very often, and it's not a complete failure right away. It takes several days for basically something to start to be an issue, and you'll catch it by then. I gave them a rundown of everything. They're going to have to refill the top off and my saltwater reservoir. I kind of educated them on that. And then also we have a Discord channel server, and I put down everything in my tank to help describe exactly what to look for and what needs to be done and what does what. Run them step by step, how to turn off a skimmer using the Apex, because if they're not familiar with it, so that they can empty the skimmer. Just the little intricacies and odds and ends. They will be handling the reefing stuff. I have neighbors that are going to come over twice a day to feed, in the morning and the evening, so that's another eyes on the tank. Not that they're experts knowing what they're looking at, but if something's really off,
if there's a flood,
they'll know. Then they have my phone number, obviously, and I gave them the number to my emergency response team. Somebody can get in touch with somebody if something really is off, which I don't expect, but you never know. I also have a webcam on the system. I have the Alcatronic giving me tests every 8 or 10 hours now. And then I have the Apex giving me temperature readings and stuff like that. So I know I can be in touch with it. I can check in daily myself just to make sure water's flowing, lights are on. That helps alleviate some of the concern or stress.
That's like several layers of observation and control going on.
Yes. So I named my house Fort Awesome, and it takes a whole village to take care of Fort Awesome and all of its creatures. And it made me think, like, do I have too much going on in my life that if I leave for 2 weeks, there's like a dozen people involved with caring for dogs and fish tanks?
Yeah, you just have an entire group of people just move into your house.
This is what my wife and I do with, and we have 2 kids. No, I'm not as stressed out or concerned about it as maybe I would have in the past. I don't know really why, other than I just have confidence in my team of specialists.
Notice that he didn't say that he asked me to do any of this.
Yeah.
See, like, I'm definitely not that specialist over here.
The reefers that are helping out, they're pretty hardcore. They know their stuff. Even something crazy was happening and they had to empty the tanks. I'd never hear the end of it, but I know that they'd be able to get it done. I have the stock tanks out in the shed, and disaster strikes, there's preparations, and everything you need is around.
That makes all the difference in the world, really.
Yeah, and the house has an automatic generator that'll pop on if the power goes out. Neighbors know me. A lot of them helped move the tank into the house. They know how nuts I am or how crazy of an operation system I have going on. And when the power is out, somebody usually gives me a message to let me know. And I'd get notices from my Nest cams and from the Apex if they were disconnected from the internet for a period of time. I'll get all that information.
Helpful tip: automation and have lots of friends.
Yeah.
Long story short there.
Yep, I'm going to owe lots of people, but the price you pay for having 650 gallons or whatever it is, or I have more than that running through my family room. So,
and then you leave.
And then leaving for 2 weeks, yeah. So
because a 2 week period that is an eternity.
It is a pretty long time.
Yeah.
I haven't been gone for that long, and
a little while.
Yeah, maybe ever.
All right. Well, this is the abbreviated version of our conversation here. Do you want to quickly plug your YouTube channel? Now's the time. Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel. If you like the quality and detail videos of Tidal Gardens YouTube video, you won't find it on mine, because I just take cell phone videos and occasionally GoPro videos, and then I just dub music over it, so you don't hear the background noise or the kids yelling and screaming, and I don't really ever talk on it. But I do chat with people who are on there, and I can't even tell you what the name of my YouTube channel is. Maybe it's Nathan Gist, or it's it's Gist, which is GIST 41980.
At some point, I'll see if I can find it and throw it into the description below.
I'm
That's a hard promotion here.
Yeah.
We really have our stuff together over here.
I'm such an expert on the social media realm.
So, Nathan, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
It was a good time.
And recording this twice.
It was a good time both times.
Both times. And obviously, have a great time in,
Thank you. The kids,
paradise on earth.
The kids have passed their COVID test, and they're allowed to go to Hawaii.
Nice.
So good for them.
Yeah, whatever. Hawaii, guys. Hawaii.
Yeah.
That is pretty much it for here. So until next time, guys, happy reefing, and we'll talk again.